Welcome everyone. Boa tarde a todos. Meu nome é Lívia, eu sou secretária do UFRJ Student Chapter. Nós somos um grupo de extensão internacional vinculado à Sociedade Americana de Química. E o Chapter foi fundado em 2017 e é supervisionado pelos professores Peter Seidel e Estevão Freire, da Escola de Química da UFRJ. As nossas atividades são voltadas para a divulgação da Química Verde, e já realizamos oficinas em semanas acadêmicas, palestras, workshops, simpósios, em parceria com a UFRJ, centros de pesquisas e empresas. Atualmente, o grupo tem 17 integrantes, 12 alunos de graduação e pós-graduação do UFRJ, da Escola de Química e do Instituto de Química da UFRJ, e 5 professores de ensino médio e técnico superior do Cefet, do UFRJ, do IFPB e do Colégio Pedro II. Em nome de todo o grupo, gostaria de agradecer a presença de todos. Sejam bem-vindos. É com muita honra que no bate-papo de hoje temos como convidado o John Moore. Fiquem à vontade para fazer suas perguntas em português ou em inglês e abrir seus microfones ou câmeras sempre que quiserem falar com o John. No final da palestra, o link do formulário de presença estará disponível no chat. Pedimos que para preencherem cuidadosamente esse formulário, diferenciando as letras maiúsculas e minúsculas de seus nomes, porque o certificado vai ser emitido da forma como você preencheu. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Livia. I'm the secretary of the ACS UFRJ Student Chapter, and we are an international extension group linked to the American Chemical Society. The chapter was founded in 2017 and is supervised by Professors Peter Seidel and Estevão Freire from the UFRJ School of Chemistry. Our activities focus on disseminating green chemistry, and we have held workshops and academic weeks, lectures, seminars, and symposiums in partnership with UFRJ research centers and companies. Currently, the group has 17 members, 12 undergraduate and graduate students from IFRJ, the School of Chemistry, and the Chemistry Institute of IFRJ, and 5 secondary, technical, and higher education teachers from Cefet, IFRJ, IFPB, and Colégio Pedro II. On behalf of the whole group, I would like to thank you all for coming. Welcome. It is with great honor that we welcome John Warner as a guest on our first Green Talk. Feel free to ask your questions in Portuguese or English for John, and open your microphones and/or cameras whenever you wish to ask a question. And at the end of the lecture, a form link will be available in the chat, and we asked for you guys to carefully fill this form, differentiating the uppercase and lowercase letters in your names, because the certificate will be issued in precisely the way you fill out the form. So now I'll give a brief introduction of John. So John received his bachelor in chemistry from UMass Boston and his PhD in chemistry from Princeton University. And in 2007, he founded the Warner Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry along with Jim Babcock and Beyond Benign with Amy Kennett. He's a distinguished research fellow at Zymergen, where he is helping to design and create commercial technologies inspired from nature, consistent with the principles of green chemistry. And he is one of the co-founders of the field of green chemistry, and he was a co-author of the defining text, and he articulated the 12 principles of green chemistry with Paul and Assis. And he serves as a distinguished professor of green chemistry at Monash University in Australia. Welcome, John.
Hello.
You can start your presentation now.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be asked to speak with you all, and I hope you're all doing well wherever you happen to be on the planet. I am currently right now, I'm not in the Boston area. I'm actually in California. The company that I work for has an office in the San Francisco area. So I'm speaking to you from an office in San Francisco. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So you need to let me share my screen.
I'll let you share your screen.
Now I can. Thank you. Okay. So here, am I, did I do it correctly? Am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you again, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about something that is very, very near and dear to my heart, and you'll find I'm quite passionate about this. I want to start with a disclaimer. There are a lot of people who claim to have all the answers to all the world's questions and everything. I do not believe that I have all the answers to all the questions. I don't claim to have that. It would be very presumptuous. I have been a professional chemist for almost 40 years, and I have come to see the world in a certain way, and I'll share that with you. But this is a conversation. I don't claim to be right. And I think we need to, with humility, just say that this is the way I look at things. Now, I have been blessed. The first 10 years of my professional life out of graduate school, I worked in industry, and I've had a lot of industrial opportunities. And then the second 10, 12 years of my life, I was a professor of chemistry and plastics engineering. And then the last 12 or 13 years of my life, I was an entrepreneur, starting a bunch of companies, inventing a bunch of things. And over these 35, 40 years, I've been involved with a bunch of different governments. And what I feel is that for us to have a sustainable future, we need to understand how we do chemistry, how we teach chemistry, how we invent chemistry, and how we manage chemistry. And it's not one or the other, it's how they all come together that's very important for our future. Okay, but we live in very difficult times. It's very polarized politically, but it's also very scary. You open up the newspaper, you turn on the radio, you look on the internet, and you hear about this is dangerous, this is toxic, this is not sustainable, this is bad. We hear all this information about things that are bad about chemistry. It's like, it's very frightening and very disturbing, because it's almost like, the game whack-a-mole, where the little animal comes up and you hit it and it comes up and it goes faster and faster and faster and faster. Well, what is the mascot of the American Chemical Society? It's a mole. All right. And so we play whack-a-mole when we talk about hazardous materials in the environment, right? Climate change, whack. Bisphenol A, whack. PFAS, whack. Nanoparticles, whack. Ocean plastics, whack. And it comes faster and faster, and we try to understand one subject, and then another subject comes, and then we try to understand that one and another one, and we're running on, and we're wondering, is this really a problem, or is it fake news? How do we, and if we chemists, if we people who, the only people in the world who know molecular structure, if we're confused, what is everyone else doing? And so what we need to do is, what we can't do is despair. Again, we're in a world where everyone likes to scare people. Look to your left, look to your right. Everyone's going to die of cancer. Everything is bad. Everything is terrible. We can't do that. We need to offer the world a positive vision, a positive path forward. And so in the United States, very famous civil rights activist, Dr. Martin Luther King, he had the famous speech when he said, "I have a dream." And that sparked the whole civil rights movement. I would argue if instead he said, "I have a nightmare," he would not have succeeded. People are not motivated by fear. They don't get up off of their chairs. They might write checks and send in money, but the only way people are going to do things is if we stay positive and optimistic. And so let's accept the reality that there are red dyes in some products that cause cancer, that there are some additives in plastics that cause birth defects, that there are some monomers that are endocrine disruptors. And the question, though, are we asking the right question? Isn't it interesting? Why would a chemist make a hazardous material? We got to assume nobody wants to do that, right? And so there is no fundamental law that says all red molecules must cause cancer. Some do. There's no fundamental rule in science that says all additives to plastics must cause birth defects. Some do. So if it's an option, then why would chemists do it? What's going wrong? And so instead of just focusing on how we make molecules, maybe we should talk about how we make chemists. Now, I'm not a historian, I'm not a sociologist, but I'm a chemist. Maybe there's something in the story of me becoming a chemist that addresses this question. So I am from a city near Boston, Massachusetts. People who know accents, my American accent is very Boston. People who know accents immediately know. The city that I grew up in had two presidents of the United States back in the 17 and 1800s. John Adams and his son, John Quincy Adams, were presidents of the United States. But also in my city, Quincy, Massachusetts, was my hero, my favorite chemist of all time, R.B. Woodward. Robert Burns Woodward got the Nobel Prize in 1965 for the synthesis of vitamin B12. He died shortly thereafter. There were 3 future Nobel Prizes that, had he been alive, he would have gotten not 2, not 3, but probably 4 Nobel Prizes. The Woodward-Hoffman rules, got Hoffman, Woodward was already dead, so he didn't do it. So really famous chemist. But what was interesting is I grew up in the city that I grew up in. I never heard of Robbie Woodward. Even though he went to the same high school that I went to, I wasn't involved in science. I had a very large Sicilian family, German family. I had 42 cousins within a 5-mile radius growing up. And we were carpenters, plumbers, electricians, nothing about going to college. I had, of these 42 cousins, none of us went to university. And so my high school, where that's where R.B. Woodward probably had chemistry in that class. But again, I didn't know anything about it, but my friends were going to college. And so I decided I wanted to go. Now, my parents, we did not have money. We couldn't afford it. So I worked 40 hours a week, full-time in the construction industry. I paid for my own tuition, and I went to the University of Massachusetts in Boston. But I did not go for science. Remember, I knew nothing about the sciences. I actually went to university as a music major. I was a musician, okay? And I played in a band. It was a Boston band, and it was in the late 1970s, early 1980s. But the name of my band, wait for it, was The Elements. This had nothing to do with carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. There's a Rubik's Cube, a glass ball. Hey, it was the late 70s. Those were our elements. And if you know the band The Cars, we sounded a little bit like them, but with better lyrics. So things were going really well. We were playing 3 nights a week. We had an agent. We actually were recording an album in the studio, in the same studio as the band Jay Giles. And so things were going really well. Everything was going wonderfully when disaster hit. And the drummer, my good friend, ended up getting leukemia. And over 6 months, he died. And all of a sudden, my life was upside down. All my life, I'd been a musician, spending all this time playing music, and all of a sudden this happens. So at the University of Massachusetts, a music major still has to take a math class, has to take a science class. So for science, just to take a science class, I did not really care, biology, physics, chemistry, I just had to take a science class. I took chemistry because it fit into my calendar. Okay, and so here I am taking chemistry as a music major. And one day, this professor, Jean-Pierre Anselme, comes into the chemistry teaching lab. He looks at me, music major, walks beside, and goes to the student next to me. And to the student next to me, he says, "Would you like to do research?" Now, all this is happening in my life. I overheard the conversation and I said, "Can I go?" And I followed them into the research lab. And when I got into the research lab, everything changed. All my life, there were two types of people. There were artists and there were scientists. And because I was a little bit good at music, I was an artist. But when I got into the chemistry research lab and I saw that people created, they imagined, they designed, I said, I bet you if I compose a piece of music on a piano, or I draw a molecule, the same things happen in my brain. That the word art and the word science isn't really about creating new things, that's something more human. And once I understood that creativity wasn't about art and science, I fell in love with chemistry. And I, instead of spending all the time as a musician, I started spending time in the undergraduate lab. And so by the time I was 19 years old, I published 5 papers in peer-reviewed journals. In fact, I was even on the cover of Celebrity magazine with Boy George. Now, if that's not famous, so this magazine calls me up and says, "Oh, John, we consider you Boston's best and brightest college graduate. We want to do a story on you." I didn't want to, I said no. And so the next day I go into school, I'm working in the chemistry lab. Now remember, I'm working full time as a construction worker. So I'm wearing a flannel shirt, I'm not shaven. And the chancellor of the university comes and makes me go to this magazine. And here I am hating life. There's all these smiling, happy people. And I'm saying, why am I here? And they do a story about this kid who has synthesized over 100 molecules that never existed in the world before, assembling atoms in unique geometry. And I'm reading this thing and I go, I'm a chemist? How did that happen? Well, next thing you know, I find myself at Princeton University doing cancer chemotherapy. I lost my friend, I want to work in cancer, and I published 12 papers in the synthesis of a molecule that ultimately became Alimta. It's a drug sold by the Eli Lilly company. It's a very, very famous molecule that's made a lot of money now. I played a little role in this, not a big role in this, but I am the witness of the invention. And so just to show you how life is strange, I lost my mom in 2002 to cancer. She was receiving the drug that I had helped develop 15 years earlier. So very strange the way the world works that way. And if you go to Princeton campus, the university, you find now that the chemistry building, this beautiful, amazing chemistry building, is built entirely on the money from this one molecule. All right. So this is my research lab at Princeton. My dad came to my graduation. Okay. He, didn't really understand what graduate school was. I told him I was an apprentice. And he's kind of looking at a telephone in my lab, not that one. One day I'm working in my lab. I'm about to graduate, but I haven't got my PhD yet. And this guy calls me up, this guy named Lloyd Taylor. He's from the Polaroid Corporation. Right? And he knows everything about me. He's been following my career. He brings me to lunch, and on the spot, he offers me the job to head exploratory research at Polaroid, the instant photography company. Now, you've got to understand, back in the 1980s, Polaroid was the coolest place to be as a chemist. So next thing you know, I'm working with Edwin Land, who's the founder of Polaroid. Only Thomas Edison has more US patents than Edwin Land at the time. Edwin Land received the Perkin Medal in 1974. How cool is that? And then they gave it to me in 2014. So really, how cool can it be? But I very quickly, within 5 or 6 years, by the time I was 28 years old, I've got 40, 50 patents. I've got products on a bunch of different markets and different things. And I just found that I really love to invent. I really love to take chemistry, invent stuff. But what? I'm a medicinal chemist. I'm not a film polymer scientist yet. And so in cells, in biology, everything happens at room temperature, ambient pressure, using water as a solvent. In industrial chemistry, everything's at high temperature, high pressure, harsh reagents. So I'm saying, there's gotta be a better way. And so I came up with this technology called non-covalent derivatization. I could give you a 10-hour lecture on what this is. Right now, just assume it's molecular biomimicry. It's how can we do industrial chemistry the way biology does it, okay? And so I invented one of my inventions in the United States. If you want to manufacture a product, you have to get approval from the EPA. You have to get what's called a low volume exemption, pre-manufacturing notification. Now remember, there's no textbook, there's no journals about non-covalent derivatization. It's not something I read in a book, I made it up. It was just a complete crazy idea that I had. And the EPA didn't know what to do with it. They said, oh, small particles, are you crazy? Molecular complexes, are you high? So Polaroid put me on an airplane, sent me to Washington, DC to explain to the EPA what non-covalent derivatization was. Okay, so I'm there. I'm standing at the branch on the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics in Washington, DC. I'm holding a briefcase of overhead transparencies. I'm a little nervous, a little scared, but I'm also a little mad. And I go and I meet the branch chief of the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics, Paul Anastas. Wait a minute, I know him. Remember when I was a music major and I followed the student into the research lab? With him. I've known him since I was 11 years old. In fact, I went to UMass with him. I was playing in a jazz band with his older brother. This is his older brother, Nick. There's me on the keyboard, very young. There's my older brother with really cool hair. And this guy here playing the guitar, if you ever go to Las Vegas, there's this show called Legends of Rock. And the person who is Rod Stewart in Legends of Rock is actually him. Has nothing to do with this talk. I just thought that would be cool. So anyways, I could say to the EPA, wait a minute, Polaroid has been for years using all these solvents, all these energies, all these hazardous reagents. And now we have an aqueous, low energy, non-hazardous process. And you're giving me a hard time because it's new. Isn't anything better for human health and the environment by definition going to be new? Shouldn't you be promoting things that are better? So I'm having this discussion with the EPA, very intellectual, about the process of regulations. My life is going very interesting. At Polaroid, I'm getting more awards. I'm getting all kinds of patents and things. My head is this big. I am so smart. I am so great. When disaster hits again, in the worst way that you could possibly imagine, all my career is going really fantastic, and my 2-year-old son dies. My son, John, was born with a birth defect called biliary atresia. My son was born where his liver was not connected to his intestines, so he could not metabolize water-insoluble nutrients. He got surgery at birth, and he ultimately died. Next week, he would be 30 years old. Lying in bed the night of my son's funeral, I'm looking at the ceiling and I'm asking myself, I wonder if something I touched in the lab caused my son's birth defect. I wonder if, heaven forbid, something I got an award for caused his disease and ultimate death. I didn't feel like I was some great inventor scientist. I felt there was something missing. And it's not the answer to the question that bothered me. It was the fact that I couldn't answer the question. I said to myself, well, gee, I'm inventing molecules, I'm making new molecules, and I don't know if something causes birth defects. I don't know if something's dangerous. This book here, Our Stolen Future, came out about that time, talking about the toxicity of chemistry in the environment. At this point in my life, I'm probably the most successful industrial chemist my age on the planet. I've already synthesized over 2,500 molecules, new molecules. And I realized 4 years of undergraduate, 3.5 years of graduate school, I never had a class in toxicity, never had a class in environmental mechanisms. How could I be so successful and have no idea what makes a molecule toxic? So I start looking. There are all kinds of information, higher incidence of certain types of tumors among professional chemists, elevated breast cancer mortality among professional chemists. Now that I'm looking, it's all over the place. How is it that I never had a seminar, never had a class, never had a lecture about how to predict whether something might hurt human health and the environment? I realized in the United States alone, not the world, just the United States, we graduate 15,000 undergraduates in chemistry every year, 3,000 master's degrees, 3,000 doctoral degrees. In 2004, in the United States, more women started to become chemists than men. What could be more important to the field of chemistry than understanding the impact on human health and the environment of molecular structure? And yet, not one university in the world requires a chemist to show any proficiency, any ability to predict whether something might be toxic to people or hurt the environment. So I ask again, why do we have red dyes that cause cancer? Why do we have additives in plastics that cause birth defects? Why are there monomers that are endocrine disruptors? This isn't some epic battle of good and evil. For some reason, the field of chemistry didn't think that this is something we should do. And yes, it is something we should do. So Paul and Astis, we realized the world didn't need a political movement, didn't need a social movement. We needed a science to, what do sciences do? They have journals, they have textbooks, they have classes, they have conferences, they have workshops. And so this is the birth of green chemistry. Me, an industrial chemist, and Paul Anastas working in the EPA, we came up with this concept and wrote this book called Green Chemistry Theory and Practice. The definition of green chemistry is the utilization of a set of principles that reduce or eliminate the use or generation of hazardous substances in the design, manufacture, and application of chemical products. This book has been translated in over 15 different languages. It's amazing now. I step back and anyone could have written this book. I don't believe this book is brilliant or amazing. It's just common sense. Before you make something in the chemistry lab, you should predict whether it might be toxic or not. That's not, why did it take so long for someone to think of that? And so to complete it, to evolve it, we added 12 principles of green chemistry. These are not social things, these are mechanistic chemistry, talking about activation energy, talking about derivatization, talking about catalysts and things like that. So this is the nuts and bolts of, if you want to go in the lab and invent something that has minimum impact on humans and the environment, here are the 12 principles that you can embrace when you're doing that invention. And now here we are almost 25 years later, and all over the place. You know, you've got L'Oreal, Monash has this amazing green chemistry building. You know, the American Chemical Society has the Green Chemistry Institute. Universities all over the world have it. The United Nations has a green chemistry program. In Germany, they named a building the John Warner Center for Green Chemistry Startups. It's amazing. And then there are at least 12, 15 journals dedicated to green chemistry. At last count, I found 50 textbooks dedicated to green chemistry. This is the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council. This is a group of 160 consumer-facing companies. And look, we are deeply concerned that students are graduating from our colleges and universities with insufficient understanding of environmental and sustainability issues. So this is now, it's just happening, and it's happening not because of me, but because of the thousands of people like you that are making this happen across the world. For me, the definition of green chemistry is the act of removing hazard from society. It's not the discussion, it's not a journal article, it's not a philosophy, it's the successful act of removing hazard. So yes, the technology has to be more environmentally benign than an alternative. That's not enough. It also has to work. If the technology doesn't work better, who's going to use it? And it has to have the right cost, because we can't have it just for rich people, it has to be for everybody. And so if a technology works better, costs better, and oh, by the way, is better for human health and the environment, that's when it's called green chemistry. And if you accept that definition, who wouldn't want it? So the only barrier is its invention. And we have to ask ourselves, are we taught in school how to invent sustainable products? How do we do it if we don't know how? And so I left Polaroid. My career was going very well, but I wanted to change academia. So I went and I became full professor of chemistry, full professor of plastics engineering, and started the world's first PhD program in green chemistry. Everything that's in a normal chemistry program, but added a 1-semester class in mechanistic toxicology, added a 1-semester class in law and policy, added a 1-semester class in environmental mechanisms. Over the next several years, over 120 students passed through this program. The average time it took one of those students to get a job in industry was 2 days. The longest anyone spent looking for a job was 2 weeks. That's because she turned down her first 6 job offers. I've been out of academia for over a decade, and I still get phone calls from companies. John, do you have any students? Because essentially, of all the products that we have, the ceiling, the carpeting, the electronics, the textiles, of all the things that we make in chemistry, maybe 10% is sustainable. Maybe 10% are okay. 90% have some problems that need to be improved. Some of them are big problems, some of them are little problems, but there's a lot. All right. If we do a search and try to find something that's out there available, maybe we'll succeed 25% of the time. But today in 2021, I would argue 65 to 70% of the technologies haven't been invented yet. If a company could have a technology that worked better, cost better, and oh, by the way, was better for human health and the environment, they would use it, but they don't exist. And so I hope I'm talking to people today that are going to dedicate some amount of their life to inventing these solutions, because we turn molecules into materials. We call that basic research. We turn materials into components. We call that applied research. We turn components into devices. We call that development. And when we make a bunch of products, we call that manufacturing. When we do this, we want to worry about the performance, the cost, the social. Hey, that's my definition of green chemistry. Because what we're doing is we're saying, okay, here is how we make products, but where does the environment fit in? We ask ourselves, where did those molecules come from? From depleting or renewable resources? At the end of the product's life, is it going to degrade into innocuous byproducts, or is it going to persist and bioaccumulate? When we manufacture, when we sell, when we use it, who is the only person who can change things? The inventor. After it's invented, it's too late. And so chemicals policy is important to create the demand, but green chemistry is the supply. And we need to change the way we do chemistry and the way we learn chemistry so that we can make the better products. This isn't the birth of ethics. I believe chemists have always cared about human health and the environment. It's not like they didn't care. But what we did before green chemistry is we said, okay, chemistry has to be dangerous. It must be dangerous, but that's okay, because we'll wear gloves to protect our skin. We'll wear masks to protect our lungs. We'll wear goggles to protect our eyes. In factories, we'll install contraptions to protect the air, the land, and the sea. Yes, it's toxic. Yes, it's different, but we'll protect people by controlling how it exposes, right? So risk has two components. It has the exposure, but it also has the actual hazard. And in the last 15 years, the science of toxicology and the science of earth sciences, we have learned a lot about the mechanisms of what makes molecules toxic, what makes molecules hazardous. And so green chemistry is saying, instead of worrying about the exposure, let's understand what makes a molecule a carcinogen. If I put a methyl group over here, maybe it won't be a carcinogen. If putting a hydroxy group over here makes this thing no longer cause birth defects. If I put a bromine over here, it's no longer gonna be an endocrine disruptor. Understanding the mechanisms to solve these problems. Industry immediately got this. Right after the book came out, Dow, DuPont, Pfizer, 3M, L'Oreal, all the companies started green chemistry programs. It just made sense. If you have a toxic material and you have a safe material, the safe material is cheap, less expensive to store, less expensive to transport. There's less, you don't have to treat it, disposal, regulatory liability, work health and safety code. Who wouldn't rather have a non-toxic environment? Just save a ton of money. That's the point, that it's not added money to do green chemistry. It saves money because a company doesn't have to pay for all these things if they don't have to worry about it being hazardous. So how does it fit into sustainability, the big picture of sustainability? Sustainability is a big concept. Okay, any word, you can think of anything and say sustainable something, sustainable economics, sustainable agriculture, sustainable education, sustainable business, sustainable chemistry, engineering. Sustainable chemistry is a subset of sustainability. It's the part that talks about molecules and materials. But even that is huge, okay, and very poorly defined. No one really quite knows exactly what sustainable chemistry is. It's chemicals policy, remediation, exposure controls. I see green chemistry as a part of sustainable chemistry, water purification, alternative energy. Here's the point. Green chemistry is not what the chemistry does. It's what the chemistry is. And so if I have a solar panel is a very important sustainability technology. We need alternative energy. But if I use toxic materials or I use high energy in the manufacturing, it's still not green chemistry. So green chemistry is not what the technology is doing, but what makes it. What are the building blocks? What are the solvents? What are the catalysts? What are the feedstock? What's the toxicity, the persistence, the energy? Hey, there are 12 principles of green chemistry, to break it down that way. That's the point of green chemistry. It's the part of sustainability that a chemist works on when we invent the new technology. Now, all these business people have done analyses. This organization in 2010 predicted that green chemistry would be a $100 billion industry by 2020. It did that in 2018. All these companies that are doing green chemistry, they're not doing it just for altruism and to save the world. They're doing it because they know they can make money. So the way I look at it, we have a toolbox in chemistry. Many, many drawers in this toolbox. There were carbon-carbon forming reactions, oxidations, reductions, hydroxylations, polymer syntheses. If we can design a molecule and it doesn't violate some fundamental rule, we probably can make it. However, if we imagine a green chemistry toolbox with all those transformations mapped on there that are non-toxic, environmentally benign, non-regulated, I told you the green chemistry toolbox is 90% empty. I believe a person, a company, a country will open up the green chemistry toolbox first. It's just better performance, better costs, better for human health and the environment. But odds are it's going to be empty. And then what do? the way businesses work, they have to get results very quickly. They got 3 months, they got to do this. So they can't say, stop everything. Let's invent a new technology. So what do? They close the green chemistry toolbox. They open up the traditional toolbox. They say, what are they going to cost for the gloves and the masks and the goggles? We got to hire lawyers. We're going to have to do all this stuff. And they use the traditional chemistry because they don't have time or the ability to invent. So everyone listening to me today, imagine that someday you invent a new tool in this toolbox and that hundreds of thousands of people you will never meet are not exposed to a hazardous material, that the environment is not exposed to materials because you invented a new tool that goes into the green chemistry toolbox. What more important thing could we chemists do? Okay, so I was at UMass for a very long time, about 12, 13 years, but I wanted to do more invention. And so in 2007, I founded the Warner Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry. And I want to use this as an example just to explain just how successful this can be. Okay, and so doing green chemistry, I've been able to create what I call the technology greenhouse. I have filed over 316 patents. I have composites and textiles, adhesives and coatings, cosmetics and personal care, infrastructure and construction, electronics, imaging systems, water technologies, medicinal chemistry. These companies have all taken inventions that we have done in green chemistry and we've licensed them to these multinational companies. Natura is one. And so here are some examples of some technologies that illustrate green chemistry. One is a company that I founded called Collaborative Aggregates, and it's an asphalt paving technology. In the United States, there is 1 billion miles of asphalt pavement. The sun and the air oxidize the surface of the asphalt, making it brittle and hard. And so every year, about 10% of the roads have to be repaved. But when we dig up the old asphalt, it's too brittle, too hard. And so we can't reuse it. We just put it in a landfill. So I said, why can't I invent an additive that allows me to use the recycled asphalt? And so back in 2013, this is my house. We dug up my driveway with a perfectly good driveway, and we did an experiment to try to use this, my invention. So the people that I came to help me, they laughed at me. They said, John, you're an idiot. You know, it was very cold. It was -8 degrees. We were using over 70% recycled material. They said, we're going to pour this out on your driveway. It's going to be a big hockey puck. So I said, oh, please just do it, do it, do it. And so they went, they opened the back of their trucks, they jumped, and it worked. It came out really nice. They grabbed onto their bulldozers and they did it. And here's my driveway just recently. It's better than the initial road. So not only is it green chemistry, it's a better technology, less money. And so started a company called Collaborative Aggregates. And the name of the product is Delta S, and Delta Mist. This is an example of green chemistry. Another example has to do with wood composites. In the world, in North America and in mostly North America, but I think South America, OSB lumber is the most popular construction material for building houses. Okay, there's a lot of toxic materials. There's formaldehyde and MDI and a lot of wood products. And so I said, there's got to be a better way. And so we invented an alternative technology. We went up to Canada and we did a 10-ton batch of OSB lumber. We then tested it. It outperforms in physical properties, water properties. It's the same cost, but not a drop of toxic materials, 100% green chemistry. And so I call this entropic composites as a part of collaborative aggregates to show that this is viable. Another example in the technology greenhouse is photovoltaics. Okay, this is one of my favorite drawings. It's by an artist called Escher. And this thing here, if you look at this with your eyes, you see the birds in the sky and you see the fish in the bottom. And you say, when do the birds turn into fish? When do the fish turn into birds? It's an optical illusion. In biology, there are a lot of gradual changes in boundaries. When you look at a mitochondria matrix and you look at the electrons crossing a mitochondrial matrix in a cell, those electrons go through many, many, many different steps. And it's very, very gradual how each one of those steps goes through the matrix. So I said to myself, what if I made a solar cell where I took a semiconductor, gradually turned it into chromophores, gradually turned the chromophores into electrolytes. So like this optical illusion, you had this infinite change from electrolyte to chromophore to semiconductor. It ended up working really well. So Michael Gretzel, the godfather of photovoltaics, measured it and declared it the highest efficient dye-sensitized solar cell in history. And so we started a company called Ambient Photonics, and it's not for outdoor highlight. In a very dark room with just a little bit of light, if you put this on the back of your cell phone, your phone will constantly charge. So it's for electronic applications and sensors and e-readers and things like that. This uses green chemistry, it's non-toxic, environmentally benign. Another example is ALS, Parkinson's disease. ALS is also called Lou Gehrig's, the terrible disease of aging. And this molecule here is called copper ATSM. It's a very good molecule for curing some neurological things, but you can only use it in animals because it's really insoluble, very insoluble. So you have to use DMSO and a bunch of surfactants. So using my technology called non-covalent derivatization, I created a form that is orally available, so you can take it as a pill and it crosses into the brain. And it's now in phase 3 clinical trials. Started a pharmaceutical company called Collaborative Medicinal Development that has developed this. And in next month, we should find out if this is going to successfully go or not. So very excited, and it was invented because of green chemistry. The last example I think I have here is hair color restoration. There might be one more. This thing here, when an insect gets bigger, it sheds its exoskeleton, and then over the course of a couple hours, it turns hard and black. Here's something in nature that goes from white to black. Well, people color their hair. So I said, I wonder if I could use this chemistry to color hair. Because right now, the leading men's hair color in the United States uses lead tetraacetate as the key ingredient. That's a very toxic material. So I looked at this insect process, and it's a tyrosinase oxidative cascade. So I got some chemistry. I didn't grind up dead bugs. I mimic it. And I got some gray hair. I put it in, and it works. Not only does it work, but it doesn't color the hair. It restores the human pigment. So this isn't artificial. It recreates. So I am very gray. When I put it in my hair goes back exactly the color it was 30 years ago. When someone with black hair uses it, it goes black. When someone with brown hair goes brown. So the same chemistry put on any person will restore their original pigment. It's non-toxic, it's environmentally benign, it doesn't wash out, it doesn't fade, it will grow out. And so in the same way that you have a fingerprint, your hair has a hairprint. And so we started a company called Hairprint, and this has been on the market for 5 years, invented with green chemistry. My last example is this one here. Back in 2015, I found myself on the center stage of the United Nations. There I am, projected up there. 2 weeks earlier, 14 days earlier, this cable television show called Whale Wars and this nonprofit called Parlay called me up, and they said, we have confiscated from an illegal fishing fleet this net. It's called a gill net. Devastating. They drag it on the ocean floor and kill everything. And so they confiscated it, and they sent a bunch of it to me. And I said, okay, I can separate the nylon from the polypropylene. I can pull out the pigment. I can take out the heavy metals, and I will make a fiber. And so what I did was I extruded the fiber. I actually built the extruder and sent it to Adidas in Germany. And standing on the stage of the United Nations next to me was someone from the board of directors of Adidas holding up their 2016 ocean plastics running shoe. That ocean plastic running shoe was invented at the Warner Babcock Institute in 2 weeks, 14 days, using green chemistry. Okay, and so my examples here, the reason I give you these examples is because I could have described any of these projects without mentioning green. They're all just kind of cool projects. And that's the point of green chemistry. It shouldn't look any different than any normal chemistry project. It's just what you would normally do with a chemist. It's more in your heart, how you approach the research. Do you want to use toxic materials or do you want to use safe materials? But again, we have to make products that society wants. And so here I am right now, and my biggest concern is this picture that I showed you before. 70% think, who is going to invent these missing elements? I hope I'm looking at people. So the most important thing I feel I do in my life is support the organization called Beyond Benign. Dr. Amy Cannon is my wife. She is the co-founder. In 2007, we started this thing. And I think it's the most important thing that we do, because what we're doing is we're asking universities to sign a commitment saying that somehow they're going to get green chemistry into the required curriculum, not the electives or the alternatives, but the required. Because here's the problem. If no professors have had training in green chemistry, how can they teach it? And so Beyond Benign is helping with school children and with university professors to find that. And so we have, about 80, 85 universities around the world have signed this commitment. And I know there's a bunch of universities in Brazil have signed it. And so this is the future. This is where the future is how do we, as scientists and as human beings, take our science, take our chemistry, and show the world that we don't have to have red dyes that cause cancer. We don't have to have additives in plastics that cause birth defects. We don't have to have monomers that are endocrine disruptors. It doesn't have to be this way, but it's not going to happen without a lot of hard work and a lot of science and a lot of invention. We're not going to snap our fingers and do it overnight. This is going to take years and years, but let's roll up our sleeves. Let's dedicate ourselves to going and inventing this future, because the world needs us to. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to me on this very important subject to me, and I hope that this is useful, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Apurva, and I'm from India, but I'm doing my master's in Germany right now.
Hello.
So yeah, and I really found your lecture. It was really good and very inspiring, and I came to know a lot of things that I haven't heard before, like hairprint, and that was really nice idea. So I had been thinking that the biggest problem we're facing right now is all this plastic that is used in packaging and that is getting accumulated in the landfill. So is there any greener alternative for this packaging, not the paper, but the plastic itself, if it can grow green?
So the answer to that question is yes, but the problem is not for everything. So the problem is that polyethylene is used for so many products. Are we going to be able to invent one solution to replace polyethylene? No. But can we invent 10 products? One that does one kind of application, one that does another? I believe, yes, we can. It's going to take us time. And there are a lot of bioplastics that are coming on board now. There's old polylactic acid and polyhydroxyalkanates, but there's better things coming, and we need to invent more. So I think that's one of the most important problems, is working with plastics in the environment. But there isn't going to be one solution. There's going to be many solutions.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, John. I'm
Hi.
Stefan from co-advisor from student chapter here.
Hello. Hi.
I remember you in Rio. I did with you a short course, 1 week short course promoted by Senai. Remember?
Yep. Yes, I remember very well. Hi. Yes. Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, great talk. I liked very much. And I make you a question about how you see the future of green chemistry. What and which point the green chemistry looks ahead? I mean process and materials. I mean like mechanochemistry. I don't know. Can you tell us?
So I get asked that question a lot. What is the most important frontier? Should we work on solvents? Should we work on catalysts? Should we work on polymers? And I believe in humans. I believe in people, and I believe that people's hearts, people's minds will solve so many problems. So for me, the answer is immediate. Let's work on education. Let's imagine a day in the future where every chemist, no matter where they go to school, learns green chemistry and then trust those people to do the right thing. If they have the skills, if they have the ability, they will invent the better future. But if they go to a traditional chemistry program and never even hear of green chemistry, then they're going to continue to invent the things that we've always been inventing. So for me, I don't think it would be presumptuous of me to pick one, because everybody has their opinion of what's most important. So let's do them all. And the way we do them all is by addressing the people and giving people the skills, and know that of all the people, they'll all pick something to fix, and we'll get to where we need to go. So for me, education, education, education.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm putting in the chat my personal website. It's if anybody wants to, learn more about this and everything. And my email is, I'm doing that now, john@johnwarner.org. I do answer my emails. I get 400 or 500 emails a day, so it takes me a little while to get back, but I answer them all. And so if there's any questions later on, I'll stay here as long as you'd like me to. But if tonight, tomorrow, you say, oh, I wish I asked this question, just please look on my website, send me an email. Oh, they're both my emails. My website is johnwarner.org. And of course, Beyond Benign, I can see in the chat, it's got an amazing set of resources. And Juliana works with Beyond Benign. We're very lucky to have her helping with the amazing things she's doing. She has a very busy life, doing her own chemistry, graduate school work and everything else, but she's been amazing for Beyond Benign as well. Greenwashing. Okay, greenwashing. I see the question on greenwashing. There are two types of greenwashing. There is the exaggeration and there's the lie. Okay, the lie we must stop. When someone says this is green and it's not green, we need to say, wait a minute, that's bad, stop it. But if it's green but not as green as we would like, we need to be careful. Because let's say you're a CEO of a big company and you're skeptical. Your investors are very mad. Money, 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 money. Don't waste time on this green stuff. Don't worry on this. But you feel personally you got to try. But you've got to be careful, because if you make too big of a deal of it, your investors will be mad. So you go and you say, we think we have made this more biodegradable, or we made this less energy usage, or it's better for global climate change. What happens is the sustainability community gets all up and go, well, what about this? What about this? That's not good. That's not good. And we want everything to be perfect. Problem is, perfect doesn't exist. And if that CEO, if that company tries to do a little bit and we yell at them and we say it's not good enough, well, then they might as well do nothing. But if we celebrate and say, yay, good for you, then they're going to do more, and they're going to do more. So not having it be good enough, we need keep our mouth shut and celebrate, because we're not all perfect. No one is, and we need to, but if someone's lying, if someone is saying this is good when it's bad, that we have to stop. But we gotta give people a break. That modern chemistry has been around for almost 300 years. Green chemistry has been around for a couple decades at best. It's gonna take us a long time to invent these things. It's not gonna happen overnight. So we gotta celebrate. And so if I make something less toxic, and someone else makes it biodegradable, and someone else lowers the energy, and then someone puts those together and does something else, if we're communicating each little step, over time, it'll accumulate and get better. But if we shout and yell at people because they haven't done everything, then people will do nothing. In my life, with all the patents, with all the inventions that I've done, I don't think I've ever worked on a project that addressed more than 3 principles. I can't. It's not possible to work on all 12 principles at the same time. You'd be just paralyzed. And so I go, okay, in this one here, I'm going to reduce the toxicity. And then it's just, we have to celebrate moving forward. And that's the way science works.
Does anyone else have a question? No, so we have some questions here that the participants sent in earlier. And one of them is, in your opinion, how can we gradually incorporate the principles of green chemistry into regular chemistry courses? Could you talk about your experience as a professor?
Yes, so again, I never want to tell someone what they should do. People should do it the way they want. So if one university thinks that they should have a single class called green chemistry, that's wonderful. If another university says, let's have it in the organic chemistry class when we learn organic. If another says, let's have a seminar program. If another says, let's put it in the labs. I don't care how it's done. There are a million ways that we can be done. And everybody is different and should be free to do it whatever way they think, but it should be done. The analogy that I use, and I use this analogy. I have a 9-year-old daughter named Natalie. My daughter Natalie speaks perfect English. She can read and she can write. But what's interesting is she doesn't yet know what a noun, a verb, an adjective, an adverb, subject, predicate. She knows nothing about the structure of language. She can read, write, and speak, but because of COVID, she has not yet had the class about the nouns and verbs and things like that. Now, you might say, well, then why bother having the class? If she's already reading, if she's already writing, if she's already speaking, why does she need to know what a noun and a verb is? Well, I would argue that right now she's just imitating her environment, doing the best that she can. But when she learns about the structure of speech, about nouns and verbs, she will get so much better, not only at how she speaks to the outside world, but how she thinks inside. I would argue in chemistry, we are like my 9-year-old daughter. No one wants to go in the lab and poison themselves. We know that we want to be safe in the lab. Companies know if you kill your customer, that's bad for sales. So we do the best we can to make things non-toxic environment. But can we point to the class we had when we were at university that taught us the nouns and verbs of chemistry to be safe? That's the 12 principles. And so green chemistry, everyone wants to do green chemistry, but do they have that skill set? In the same way of learning the structure of language, we need to learn the structure at the molecular level of safety. Okay, and there's a bunch of different ways. And so I would never tell a university, this is the way you must do it. My preference is a standalone class. The way I look at it, we have a textbook called analytical chemistry. We have a textbook in a class called organic chemistry. We have a textbook in a class called physical chemistry, inorganic chemistry. But I would argue there is no such thing as an organic chemist. There is no such thing as an inorganic chemist. Can you imagine someone that only did organic, no analytical, no physical? You can't function as a chemist. If you don't do all of chemistry, you may identify with a class that you took, but we are whole chemists. And so in the same way, there should be a textbook in a class that looks at green chemistry and how to predict impact on human health and the environment. So in my perfect world, there would be a 1 semester, maybe 2 semester class, and there would be a textbook, and everyone who gets a degree in chemistry would take that. Now, I'm not going to be successful at making that happen. I wish I could, but that would be my preference. But if universities don't want to do that, I'll take it any way I can.
Great. So another question is, after 20 years, how have the achievements in green chemistry education evolved?
Again, the amazing work of Beyond Benign. It's such a small group of people, and there are like almost 300 lesson plans posted on the web for free that people can download and use. But it's Beyond Benign, I would say, is a leader in green chemistry education. But every continent, almost every country has amazing people promoting green chemistry and doing the best that they can to make this happen. And so if I sit back and think about it, I almost get very emotional and almost start to cry when I think of how many people around the world are dedicating themselves, their time and their effort to making green chemistry education happen. I can't think of anything more important for the future of the human race, to be realistic. And it's amazing, and the progress that we're making is cool. We've got a long way to go, and honestly, no one knows where it's going to end. This is something that will always evolve. We will learn new mechanisms of things that could cause harm. And so we need to constantly be updating. And so in my perfect world, everyone would every 2 years have an update class on green chemistry. What have we learned in the last 2 years about causes of cancer? What have we learned in the last couple of years about causes of global climate change? And not just take that class once when we're a student, but currently think about it. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, nurses, architects have to take classes every couple of years and maintain a license. Chemists, after they graduate from school, their education is done. I would love to have a voluntary, I don't want to have it be a political requirement, but I'd love for a community of chemists to sign a pledge saying every 2 years I will learn the latest knowledge in green chemistry so that anything I do is always up to date. That's what I feel the future of education has to be, not only in the schools, but universities as well.
Okay, so another question is, do you think we will see legislative changes in the US that force companies to only do green chemistry?
You can't. The problem is that right now, they haven't been invented yet. So it's not as much a forcing, in a way, I look at green chemistry as being smart chemistry. And you can't legislate people being smart. There are some smart people, there are some not so smart people. And so it's not something we can force people to do. What we can do, though, is we can help universities get the curriculum into place. We can help with testing. Right now, one of the biggest issues is testing the toxicity. If you invent a new technology, how do you know if it's a carcinogen or not? How do we test it? So where I think governments have a lot to play in is that. So in the United States, last year, in the political climate of the United States, I helped write and I testified to the House and to the Senate in the United States, the Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act. If you're familiar with US politics and how polarized it is, it passed unanimously. All the Democrats, all the Republicans, all voted yes. Trump tried to veto it last year, and they overturned his veto. So that never happens in US politics. And so people who want to protect the environment see green chemistry as protecting the environment. People who want to be competitive economically see green chemistry as a path to economic development. So everyone, it's an opportunity where everybody sits. So it's not so much forcing, it's looking at how how do we teach people? Because if we were in the future and everyone I was convinced knew how to do green chemistry, well, then that's a different conversation. But I would argue maybe 2% of the chemistry population knows what green chemistry is and can do it. It's a long way to go before we make people do something that they don't know how to do. You know, we can't make someone run a marathon. They have to train for it. It's the same thing with green chemistry.
All right, does anyone else have any questions? You can ask in the chat or open your mic to ask a question. No? So thank you, John, for accepting our invitation.
Yes, thank you.
For the content that you shared. And I would like to thank again the participation of all of the viewers. And yeah, we'll be putting in the chat the list, the presence list. Here.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. And again, anything I can do to help, please reach out by email on my website. Please, anything I can do to help. And I look forward to the next time I'm down in Brazil. I hope it's not too far in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Goodbye.
Thank you. All right, be well. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.